Michael Brockstein, also known as Senator Blutarsky of Get the Picture. We are discussing some of the news kicking around the athletic department in Butts-Mehre while we wait for some football news. But we are going to talk on some football. But first, we're going to touch on the discussion that's been, that Seth Emerson has reported since the weekend that Coach Piarano is going to be leaving the University of Georgia as track and field coach, leaving quite a legacy. He's won both men and women national championships the last few years. He's brought in a somewhat of a celebrity, Matthew Bowling from Texas as a sprinter. It brought a lot of excitement and a lot of pride to the University of Georgia, but he's walking away. Michael, fill us in on sort of the background on this and what you understand it to be, and also touch on what Seth has reported.
Well, bottom line, as I like to say, there are two priorities at Butts-Mehre, and the first is money, and the second is football, and they're fairly closely linked at this point, which is, in a management way, that's kind of lucky. And bottom line, Georgia has been a football school historically. That's just the way things are dealt. The other problem, and it's something that Seth has touched on quite a bit, and I totally agree, is that Butts-Mehre and the athletic director, going back to McGarity, strategic planning has never been a strong suit, or I'm not even sure it's ever been even a priority. And so capital projects in particular seem to get addressed on a catch-as-catch-can basis, or, maybe it's even a squeaky wheel getting grease kind of thing. My understanding right now is the top capital priority outside of whatever they do with football is upgrading the tennis facilities, which is something that should have been done a decade ago. And I think all the embarrassment of the NCAA, walking away from doing prestige tournaments in Athens, considering that, McGill had done such a fantastic job promoting that, it has been a real embarrassment for the school. And so now they're finally taking some belated attention and trying to clean that up.
Well, so to back it up just a little bit, so for the guys that don't know, Piarano wanted and was promised a new facility, an indoor facility that would bring talent and also meets to Athens, and it doesn't look like it's going to happen. So he's leaving, right? Is that how we understand the situation? And you're telling us that not only is it not imminent, but there are many other facilities that are going to be upgraded and before we can touch on track and field.
I don't know that he's even been promised a facility. I mean, my understanding is that when they won the national championships in 2018, and he was in the middle of a 5-year contract. And I will also say this: he's one of the better paid coaches in Athens. I mean, he's not at Kirby Smart's level or Crean's level, but for a non-revenue sport, he's paid pretty well. The school simply wanted to keep him happy by extending his contract. And he refused to agree to do that. He's working on a 1-year contract right now. That's all he was willing to do. What he's been hammering is that he wants the facilities because he thinks that it helps promote the program and promote the school. And they're just not prepared to give him what he wants. And so basically he's saying, if you're not going to give me the facilities, I don't see any point in staying. That's basically where it's at.
Graham, what do you think of that as a writer and follower of Georgia sports? I mean, you know who he is, but what does it matter? What do you think it matters to the average football fan? I mean, we are a football school, and what do you think?
I mean, I don't think it matters at all to the average football fan. That's why he's not going to get the facility, and he's probably ultimately going to leave. What matters to the Georgia football fan and the influential Georgia football boosters tends to get done in Athens, but this is not something that falls onto that radar. $20 million is definitely a lot of money for a non-revenue sport. At the same time, when you invest in a non-revenue sport on that level, kind of like what Michael was referring to with the tennis program in Athens for so many years, you can become kind of the premier destination. You can also bring events and publicity back to the university that'll, make that money back over time. But Yeah, I mean, I think that's where we are as an athletic department. There's one thing that matters, and that's football. But I think more importantly, the reason the athletic department is in that spot is because that's where we are as a fan base at Georgia right now. Is football is the only thing that matters. It's the only thing that's cared about by, the vast majority. And until there's some sort of emotional investment or pride taken in some of these other activities in sports, you're not probably going to see any sort of significant investment, and you're probably not going to see any sort of significant standards for the coaches, which is why you have Tom Crean doing what he's doing without consequence.
So you don't think there's any trickle-down effect of the new AD, Josh Brooks, coming in as first, he's got, but we're going to touch on basketball a little bit, but he's got a basketball program that's not doing too good, and he's got a track and field program that is doing really well, and he's going to let him walk. Is that, so does that say anything about just sort of like the athletic department as a whole, that maybe the average fan can say, well, maybe this should matter a little bit? We talked about the prestige and all that sort of thing, but do you think that has a trickle down effect to, other positions that the fan might care about, whether it be basketball or women or gymnastics or any of those other things, that if football's that important that, it could trickle down and possibly hurt football down the road? Do you think there's any chance of that?
I don't think so. I mean, I think if Kirby Smart was winning national championships, short of $10 million a year or what Saban's getting, but I mean, I think if he was winning, one every other year, he would probably be paid that at some point down the road. I mean, I don't think the spending commitment is equivalent between football and all these other sports on campus. I mean, Georgia spent $3.7 million alone on recruiting, in 2019. So
that was kind of my point on Twitter, was that, Kirby, and I think you talked about it in your blog, Michael, that, he got not a blank check, but, his recruiting budget was signed off without any, and it was $3.7 million, and all of that is huge money, but a facility like that can last for decades at $20 million to keep a coach happy, it seems like a pretty small price to pay when the athletic department is doing well. Talk about some of the numbers that if you don't follow Michael on his blog, get the picture. I think it's on the screen, but he does a great job of talking about sort of the workings of Butts-Mehre and sort of understanding how it all comes together. Is there money issues that maybe that we don't know about, or is there anything you want to talk about that why that $20 million price tag isn't even going to be touched by Josh Brooks at this stage in his career?
I wouldn't call it a money issue. I'd probably call it a spending philosophy. Basically, in terms of big ticket stuff, Georgia's got one way, this is even true with football, has got one way of paying for things, and that's basically announce a project and tell the donors to step up and pay for it. I mean, that's basically how the big football things got done. Georgia didn't pay for those things out of just its ordinary operating income. It basically encouraged donors to step up. And what I would say is that if any other program in Athens could get the same kind of donor support, Josh Brooks would be happy to sign off on it and green light whatever the heck donors wanted. I'll give you a perfect example of what I'm talking about in terms of motivation and priority, and it's Tom Crean. I mean, we're all sitting around here looking at what just happened and screaming about, why don't you just go ahead and pay that $7 million buyout? That's not going to happen. That's anathema. I mean, bottom line, the program's in a ditch right now. I mean, you can argue whether Crean's figured out a way to get it out, but there isn't a coach. There isn't a coach after the roster imploded. There's not a coach in the country that was going to come in and dramatically change the team's fortunes this year. And once you start with that, the math is, do I want to spend $7.2 million on a buyout now or wait a year and have it cut in half? That's Georgia. Now, if you go back and look what happened to Crean when things imploded at Indiana, you know what happened there? Donor stepped up and wrote an $11 million check to get his ass out of Bloomington.
Stroked that check.
Yeah,
there wasn't even any hesitation. I mean, basically, if they hadn't have done it, they would have ridden the AD's ass out of town too. They were just, there was a motivation there for it. And so if there's ever a similar motivation here, if somebody wanted to step up and write a $20 million check for the track and field program to keep him here, Brooks wouldn't have a problem with that at all.
That's a great point, because I'm looking at this and I don't see the balance sheet, but I understand and see the numbers of a balance sheet. It just seems like, oh, they've got money, why not spend it? And I guess that's not real. I mean, Josh Brooks, manages all of that, but he doesn't. It's all got to run through the process. Exactly. He doesn't control the purse string.
Correct.
The purse string. So that's, there it is. You've said it. Well, and somebody's got to write a check, and they're not going to come out of their reserves to keep Pirano there. So
don't forget, they just got handed a $23 million check from the conference. I mean, they literally have money. If they want to do this, they could do it tomorrow, but it's just not the way they operate.
Well, it's also, do you think Brooks this early in his tenure is kind of still in a position where it's like, I think any athletic director only has so many matches to burn, so to speak, in terms of going to the boosters and asking for these types of things. But it's like, Brooks is really early on as AD. Like, do we feel like he's still kind of in a position where he's trying to tread lightly, or do you think that if this was something that was a priority to him, or
keep in mind a couple of things. First off, he's an insider. He's been in Athens for a while. So he knows the temperature of the boosters and the rest of it. And Seth pointed this out in a column he wrote yesterday, the day before. Brooks likes the track and field program. I think he's got a kid who runs track and field. So it's not like he's disinterested. But again, bottom line here is, if there's no booster support for it, it's just not the kind of thing he's going to, put his neck out on the line to support. There's just not the issue for it there. And again, what's driving Butts Mare, like I said, is money number one and football number two. So unless you can check one of those two boxes, there's just not going to be any kind of immediate sense of urgency about dealing with something.
Well, you touched on the basketball, and anybody that follows me on Twitter knows my stance on Tom Crean. But that is, we do have some good news, because Aaron Cook from Gonzaga, who played some significant minutes for that Final Four team, has committed to Georgia. We've lost a ton of. It's well documented on the players that have exited the program, but he's brought in some guys. But again, to your point about the money, it's like, as much as a critic as I was of Tom Crean, I never thought that, number one, it was feasible to do the buyout, and maybe if McGarity were still there, he could go to bat for that money. But with Josh Brooks coming in, COVID, all those issues, that wasn't going to happen. So as critical as I've been, I realized that's throwing good money after bad money at this point. He's going to get a year. Is there any hope that do we think that Tom Crean's just going to figure this out, and he's got these transfers, Aaron Cook, and then, but what again, bring it back to football. Do you think the football fan really cares outside of the 6 or 7 people I blow up on Twitter every time something happens?
I think Crean has got, and this is the other big difference between basketball. I'm going to really hit you today. Now we can talk about playoff expansion if you want to, but the one big difference in coaching expectations right now is Kirby Smart's got to look at cracking a 14 field. All Crean's got to do is basically nudge his team up to being the 68th best team in the country to get into the play-in. I guarantee you, if you can associate NCAA with Georgia basketball after the season, he's back.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah. That is an incredibly low bar that he's got to cross. Well, if he gets lucky on the mix of players, who knows?
Jump in, Graham, because I know you got.
Well, you're right. You're definitely right. If he makes the NCAA, he's back. So, but just judging by where the talent that he had on the team last year has ended up, like Kansas, Kentucky, like all these
Arizona,
guys, Arizona,
Auburn, the Auburn guys. KD at Auburn hurts.
Like, what I see is a guy who, good coaches, they take the talent on their team and they make the sum of those parts more talented than the individual talent that each of those guys have. Crean has kind of done the reverse and taken a bunch of really talented guys and made them not very good when you put them all together. So I don't think that we'll be seeing Georgia in the NCAA tournament, and I would love to be wrong about that. Like, if he comes in and takes us to a good season this year, then I'll be as happy as anyone about it.
That's right.
I'll have a lot of crow to eat, but
not as much as me. Not as much as me.
Not as much as you, but I mean, as far as the average football fan caring about it, again, like, if this kind of thing was going on in the football program, you were having a mass exodus of star players, and you were coming off of, hell, I don't know, three straight seasons now, I guess it's been, where you have underperformed the guy that got fired to bring you in, and you're making 3 times what the guy who got fired before you was, what Fox was. I mean, he'd be gone. But again, the point continues to be that nothing matters like football matters, and there's not the fan standards for basketball. And until there is, I don't know that Georgia will ever have a good to great basketball program on any consistent basis, because there's not.
I think if he makes the NCAA tournament, there's no doubt. Yeah, I think it would be poor decision not to bring him back at that point. But the season that I fear is the just over 500 in the SEC, maybe an NIT, but what do you do there? What does a young AD do there where he's got progress going? He's under contract for another year. That's the kind of the thing I fear, is that this contract that Greg McGarity wrote was so over the top, and I mean, so front loaded that it was going to be hard. I mean, we're not going to, it's brought in 1 year after 3 bad years. That's the one. That's the season I fear, is that we see progress, but yet not enough to really believe. But an NCAA berth would make me actually totally change course. So,
let's not forget, Crean's taken basketball teams to the NCAAs. It's not like it's not going to be a first thing that ever happened. I mean, you make a good point, Josh. I mean, the real problem that Brooks has got here is that McGarity negotiated a lazy, terrible contract with Crean. He wasn't bidding against anybody. Crean was out of a job at the time and basically handed him the keys to the kingdom. And so, Brooks is stuck managing a no-win situation. Like I said, there's a lot of things I can be critical about, but I don't have a problem defending Brooks letting Crean come back for another year. It's no other way to go, really.
No, there is no way to go. We're in for a dime, in for $3.2 million at this point. So, okay, let's talk some football. I want to just can praise you. I mean, it was when we talked before the G-Day game, you said we were all questioning what our secondary was going to look like and who was going to play. And you said it, Michael, that we were not going to see our starting secondary on that Saturday, and which clearly is not the case. We knew Tyke Smith was going to come, but he was not around to play in the G-Day game. Since then, we've got Turnage from Alabama and Darian Kendrick from the kid that was dismissed from Clemson is sounds like going to be coming to Georgia. So let's talk about our secondary, and as the portal takes away of our basketball program, seems to be bringing to the football program. Graham, talk to us about our secondary.
No, I mean, I think you start looking at this a little bit, and I mean, Lewis Cine and Christopher Smith are both proven players in my mind. I mean, if you go and look at the PFF grading and lots of other evaluators in terms of how Christopher Smith has played and just the tape that we've watched on our shows, he finished the season on a really high note and was covering as well as anyone in that secondary at the end of the season and in the bowl game. So I think that you have a known commodity up the middle there. And you add Tyke in at star, you have another known commodity. With Kendrick, if Kendrick comes in as one of those wide corners, I mean, you're talking about a guy who was a projected first round draft pick on some of the 2022 mock drafts right now. Like, you were talking about a very talented corner, a former 5-star player that had 3 years in Clemson's program. So all of a sudden,
1 year as a receiver, by the way, the guy's got great hands.
Yeah, that too. I know. And I mean, that would be nice because we haven't really had that guy with sticky hands in the secondary in a while. But I mean, if all of a sudden you're looking at a battle between Ringo and Speed and maybe Kimber and whoever else, maybe a Nyland Green or one of these young freshmen coming in for that last wide corner spot. I think you can live with that. I think having, that one spot in the secondary that's maybe a question mark is a lot better than having 3 or 4. So, I mean, if that's the case, honestly, and he comes in, I think it raises the ceiling for Georgia quite a bit and probably raises their prospects significantly in that Clemson game, just not having an experience all over the field. What about you, Michael? Where are you?
I'm going to give you my latest unified theory of Kirby Smart's roster management. I think that the LSU SEC championship game was a defining moment for Kirby in terms of realizing I can't keep running the same offense forever. And I think he had the same light bulb go off after the Florida game last year. And I mean, it didn't help that we had injured players, particularly LeCount being out of the game. But I think what Mullen did a good job of exposing was Georgia simply didn't have 6 or 7 guys in the defensive backfield that could control a modern pass-oriented spread attack. And right. I think Smart decided that had to get addressed. And I think that actually started on signing day because Georgia left a couple of spots on the table. They didn't sign the full amount. They signed 20. To me, that was I think I said this last time we talked. I think that was a signal that Kirby intended to do some diving into the portal to basically address that stuff. And so I think the big thing with Kendrick and also the kid from Alabama is he's trying to make sure that he's got 6 or 7, maybe even 8 guys that he can, rotate in there with some degree of confidence. They're going to be able to shut things down like running that damn
wheel route out of the backfield.
Yeah, I mean, there's just they just didn't have enough bodies to basically combat it. Mullen kept flipping around till he found the way to, attack it. And I think Smart's decided I'm not going to have my pants pulled down like that again. So I think that's as much as I think, Kendrick's a very good shot at starting. I think the bigger thing here is that Kirby is doing what he can to shore up overall depth. It's not that guys like Ringo aren't going to be able to play, but there's a lack of experience. And I think that's something where the more bodies Kirby's got to play around with and juggle and fit into the puzzle, the better he's going to be and the happier he's going to be about it.
Yeah, no, I agree. And I mean, I think that with Turnage and some of these guys you're talking about, and you shared the show we had done on Sunday with Nathan, but like kind of getting to a defense where you can legitimately have 6 DBs on the field is a big leap forward for Kirby Smart. And I mean, that's where that Florida game broke down last year, right? Like it wasn't versus the star or when the safeties came into coverage. It was when Jermaine Johnson was, hooked up on a running back who came out of the backfield and lined up in the slot or something like that. Like that was where the breakdown kind of happened. So yeah.
Remember when Monty Rice had to cover Waddle? And Monty actually did a pretty good job on that play, but there's only something you can do.
Yeah. And I mean, I think that's what's interesting about this Clemson game. Kind of, I was looking at some of their Notre Dame highlights last night. Kind of trying to figure out what they're going to be with Ungalele under center for those guys is interesting because I don't know that he's the full spread, pick you apart guy. I mean, he's a great quarterback with a great arm. It's just I don't know with the ability he has with his feet if that's how they want to run it, or it'll be interesting to see what's going on there because I don't think they're really going to be one of those teams that's coming out and going 5 wide on every play. I think they're still going to try and run the ball with some consistency and significance. And if that happens, that's probably a blessing for Georgia. I think Georgia matches up better versus that than they do these widespread passing attacks. But if Georgia's going to win a national title at any point, they have to be able to stop that. And that's probably what they're going to see, if and when they get to the SEC championship against Alabama, they're going to see those types of sets. And the same will happen if they have to play in Oklahoma or in Ohio State or go on down the line.
Well, do you think that these additions and maybe there's even more room for another secondary that it's going to hurt a little bit down the road with some of the talent that he's recruited, number one, that may be put out by not getting some playing time they thought they might have gotten this year with the veterans coming in, and also maybe some guys that he wanted to bring in. Do you think that this sort of turnover and this portal, additions can be subtractions for long term? Is there any thought to that you guys have?
Well, keep in mind, first off, I think they lost more players in the offseason this year than they expected. I mean, they knew they had kids going to the NFL, but I don't think they were expecting Major Burns to walk out, and I think they were a little surprised about Stevenson as well. Though, again, I heard there was some homesickness there, but I think Kirby lost more kids out of the secondary than he thought he was going to. So I think that's part of what this portal scramble's been about as well. That what he was looking to fill got even a little bit deeper.
All right.
Yeah.
So, I mean, I know we've got a lot of talent there, and it would be a shame to lose some of it. But also, I know that, everything, especially on the offense, is primed and ready to compete at the highest level. And, Kirby clearly doesn't want to take any chances on a young secondary, like all the points you guys brought up. And is there, winding it down a little bit, I want to open it up. Is there anything that you guys want to talk about that you haven't got a chance yet, or you want to shout at anybody or yell at anybody or do whatever you want? This is your Thursday morning playpen. What do you?
Well, I'll take.
I knew it. That was low hanging fruit.
Man, you know me too well. Yeah, no, I think that we've entered a new era of lazy Kirby Smart takes that we have gotten to a level previously unforeseen with just every time I flip on a national college football podcast, it is, just some take about I heard a take a few days ago. I won't say the podcast, but basically because Georgia's taken Kendrick or interested in Kendrick, it was just this incredibly quick leap by three people that were oh yeah, so Georgia's good with character issues and Dabo's not going to put up with that. It's well, Dabo had the guy on his roster for 3 years, and apparently he was dealing with a sick child and all this stuff. There's just no context at all behind any of these scorching hot takes, and we're getting Dan Mullen being a better game day coach. Dan Mullen's a much better play caller than Kirby Smart because,
offensive play caller. Yes, because he's been an offensive play caller.
Because he's been an offensive play caller. But it's as you pointed out, Josh, how many times has Kirby Smart had a bye week and come into the biggest game of his season and had to burn 2 timeouts on the first series because the wristbands didn't match up on his offense. Yeah. So it's there's not this lack of organization or planning or philosophy or any of this stuff going on at Georgia. And the thing that pisses me off the most about this is if you took the time to kind of read into what was going on and pay attention, there is a lot of signs of the evolution of, Kirby Smart as a head coach, and God knows he made some decisions that frustrated me early on in game, and there was some philosophy on offense that frustrated me early on, but all signs point to that he has learned from those things and he has continued to evolve, and I think that's all you can ask for from a guy who's, still a young head coach at his first head coaching job. And so, the last one that I'm still hearing is people speculating that Kirby's not going to let JT Daniels throw it around. And if you watched Georgia football at all last year, you saw route concepts all over the field that were a massive evolution from the year before under James Coley. You saw wide receivers running wide open all the time in spread formations. You also saw a quarterback that could not recognize those open guys or get the ball to them until JT Daniels came in, and then the whole thing, lit up. So that's my soapbox. I'm tired of lazy national media people saying lazy takes. And if you guys are going to do your whole thing, slam Kirby Smart thing, then do some research and have some facts behind it, because you don't. And they're out there if you want them.
Hey, Graham was one of the 3 people in that podcast, Kirk Herbstreit.
No, it wasn't. Why? I haven't heard anything from him. Did he say
I mean, I just go back to the infamous Mark Richt has lost control.
Oh, yeah.
I mean, part of the reason you get that particular take, we brought it on ourselves because we used to like to think we were kind of holier than now when it came to, we walk we walk with the angels in terms of running a program. We like to win the right way. So, when the perceived blemishes appear, there's always people that just love to jump on stuff like that. But no, I agree with you overall. I mean, I told you this yesterday. I mean, some of it's laziness, some of it is just, we live in a world where social media is all about clickbait. And so if you can get people to jump and respond, you've had a success for the day. So I think that's some of it too. But, bottom line, when it comes down to it, at SEC Media Days, Georgia's going to be the overwhelming pick to win the SEC East. I mean, if you look at the Vegas odds, I mean, Georgia's considered one of the top 5 programs in the country. So, I mean, most of that stuff you just kind of brush off and realize it's idiots trying to manipulate a situation and just let it go.
Have you seen any early season lines or win totals that you find enticing?
I'll tell you what surprises me in a non-Georgia setting is I obviously think LSU is going to be better this year than a lot of people who I think are pretty smart do, and I'm surprised why that's the case. I mean, they're talent-wise they are loaded, and right. I mean Orgeron did the biggest thing he had to do to get that team back on the right track, and that was fire Pelini. They're not going to be any worse on defense. Their secondary is going to be the best in the country this year. I just don't understand why people think they're going to be a 7-win team in 2021. And that's what I'm seeing. A lot of the win total projections are like at 7 and 8 wins. I don't know if they're going to be Alabama this year, but I don't think they're going to be that bad.
Well, it's interesting too, because Ole Miss is 7.5, which you'd have to go back to the Freeze era for them having a win total anywhere close to that in the preseason. So it's like, it feels like that's what Vegas is kind of saying is, maybe LSU loses to Ole Miss.
Did you see the post I put up the other day? Somebody on some message board had taken Bill Connolly's SP Plus and projected, and they had Ole Miss at 10-2, and I'm like, what?
If that happens,
not with that defense. There's no way.
No.
That defense and that schedule, that's yeah.
I mean, Florida at 9 wins, I think is pretty telling. When you consider a team like Penn State is also at 9 wins, Miami's at 9.5 on their total, kind of where they fall in the national pecking order. Washington's a 9-win predicted total. USC's a 9-win predicted total. That kind of moves Florida down a peg in the pecking order if that bears out. So, I mean, that Vegas is definitely not super bullish on the Gators.
Well, thank you guys both for coming in on this morning and talking some football. Hopefully we gave you guys something to ride around and listen to your car or check it out on the YouTube thing that you do with the phone and everything. We're going to continue to try to, speaking of clickbait, we're trying to generate our own clickbait ourselves. So, no, it's been fun, Michael. It's always a pleasure to have you.
Thanks.
I enjoy, and please follow Michael Senator Blutarsky on his website, blutarsky.wordpress.com, and follow him on Twitter at mummypole. And Graham is always cranking out good stuff at dawgsports.com, and follow him at Dawg Out West. I am Josh, also known as Dawg_stats on Twitter. We're going to do some more of this. Michael, I hope you'll come back with us. We had you brought some great info, and we really appreciate your time this morning.
My pleasure, guys. Always good.
All right.
Thanks, Michael.
Go Dogs.
Indeed.
Go Dogs.